Hi everyone, my name is Fritz Menzer and I'm going to talk about my study on immersive storytelling using 2D games and 3D audio. Now you might be asking yourself, isn't there already a tool for immersive storytelling called virtual reality? So please let me explain why I think that there will be an interest in alternative ways for immersive digital storytelling. First of all, developing VR applications is complex and time-consuming. And even if you already have a suitable 3D model for your heritage site, you will still need to create all the 3D characters you need to tell your story, which can of course be much more complex and time-consuming than animating 2D characters. And speaking about characters, it actually turns out that having realistically looking but somewhat lifeless characters will distract your audience more than some cute cartoon-like characters due to the uncanny valley effect. Furthermore, VR requires specialized hardware, and not everyone has that, even if it is just a cardboard box with a pair of lenses and a slot for your phone. And last but not least, some people get motion sickness from VR. So the question is, can we get a cheaper and more accessible kind of immersion? And I tend to say yes, as one such option is to simulate a 3D environment not for the eyes, but for the ears. Or in other words, to use 3D binaural audio, which requires only a pair of headphones, which most people already carry around anyhow with their smartphones nowadays. And my hypothesis is that by combining 3D audio with a 2D game, we can create immersion into a story easily, while always staying on the cute side of the uncanny valley, and also leveraging the audience's imagination. So on a most abstract level, here is how I've integrated 3D audio with a 2D game engine. First of all, I'm using the free open source Escoria 2D game engine and a separate custom 3D audio renderer. All the information that the renderer needs is sent as UDP packets from the game engine. Since this is a proof of concept, only the listener position and orientation is transmitted so that the user can walk around in the environment, and all the acoustic parameters and sound sources are hard-coded in the renderer. The real challenge actually lies in the renderer needing 3D Cartesian coordinates. While the 2D game engine, of course, works with 2D coordinates, which are actually a mapping of the 3D space using perspective. Now, if you look here at this light green area, which is the area where the user can walk around, and compare it to a top view of this area, you see that this mapping is highly nonlinear. And fortunately, implementing an inverse perspective mapping to get the 3D coordinates from the 2D coordinates on the screen is relatively straightforward. However, since a hand-drawn or AI-generated image is not necessarily geometrically precise, as a photo would be if you know the lens, additional flexibility is required. So the method I have developed is that inside Escoria, the user can draw an arbitrary convex quadrilateral, which corresponds to the floor area, which is this transparent white area here with the corners 0, 1, 2, and 3. And first of all, given the horizon position, I can actually, and assuming that this area is horizontal, I can apply the inverse perspective mapping, and I will get some other quadrilateral. But this does not yet necessarily correspond to the floor area of the room as it is defined in the 3D audio renderer, and as I define it also with 4 points that are in the coordinates of the audio renderer inside the Escoria. So in order to match the inverse mapped floor area from the screen with the actual floor area of the renderer, I need to do some flexible stretching. So I kind of treat that quadrilateral as if it was some kind of a rubber sheet. And this is how I then in the end get the actual floor coordinates for the renderer. Now let's see how this whole thing works in practice. So I can walk around in this environment and I can hear some sounds from the hammering of the coppersmiths. And now it seems that I'm actually going away from these sounds. So let's come back. And let's see where these sounds come from. Oh yeah, right, of course. They come from the coppersmith bazaar. And they're getting louder. So to evaluate how the entire system works, I have done two approaches. For the first method, I first test the system if what it does makes sense from a technical standpoint. So for example, I've tested that if I walk in a straight line on the screen and also in the space of the renderer, I'm moving in a straight line. And that turns out to be true. Then I also evaluated the walking speeds, and there I found out something interesting. So if I walk along the y-axis, so up and down on the screen, the speed is actually pretty constant and about the speed that you would expect, around 1 meter per second. However, if I walk from left to right or right to left, or if I walked in the past, then I had wildly varying speeds. So in the front of the screen, like in the bottom of the screen, it was very fast, and the further I went back in the scene, it became slower. And it turned out actually that this was a bug in Escoria, and we could actually fix that bug. Then I also did an evaluation that was more qualitative, where I was interested how users experience this game, and I got 3 people who were or who are familiar with the scene that is simulated in the bazaar of Isfahan, and I got the following feedback. So multiple people actually told me that it does feel like being inside the bazaar. And then also some feedback, interesting, now suddenly I hear it on this ear when changing the walking direction. And things like, yeah, I understand what I hear with the character's ears. And people also want to have more different sonic environments. And in general, people seem to be a little bit confused about where sounds are coming from. So even though this is a very limited study with only 3 people and just a few verbal feedbacks, I already see 2 themes coming up. And one is that, yes, the sensation of being inside the bazaar is plausible, so goal achieved. But on the other hand, well, there is some confusion about where sounds are coming from. So this leads me to the future work. Of course, that is something that needs to be addressed. And I assume that this is caused by the mix of first-person audio with third-person visuals, which means that if the character is actually walking towards me, what I see on the right-hand side of the screen, I hear as coming from the left and vice versa. And of course, the 3D audio renderer is really a minimal implementation at the moment, so there should be more features like loading custom audio files and enabling different environments. And this, of course, means also to extend the communication protocol. And in the end, the goal is really to provide this tool to game developers so that everyone can develop 2D games with 3D audio. And to conclude, I want to say that this preliminary study has already shown that integrating 3D audio rendering into 2D games can convey a feeling of being inside an environment, even without the need of specialized hardware. And I also realized, having not worked with Escoria before, that creating 2D games is actually very accessible. So I was able to get something running just walking through a tutorial within about half a day. And I'm also very keen on making 3D audio scene development equally accessible, since combining these 2 methods, if they are both accessible, it provides an entire new way to tell stories. And let me finish with this. There are so many fascinating stories, both where I come from and here in the Middle East, and I hope that by providing a new tool for immersive digital storytelling, more stories will get told to a broader audience. Thank you very much for your attention.